All right, I'm just going to talk very briefly, and actually, believe me, it is going to be very brief. I know you doubt it, but it is about using the word no when you're training. And just to say that if you are one of the people who relies quite a lot on the word no, or if you find yourself saying no quite a lot during your training, then it's indicative of the fact that A, your dog doesn't understand what it is that you're asking of them, and B, that the command, if your dog does understand in a positive sense, so they've earned reward for the behaviour, but you find yourself saying no in difficult circumstances, it means that you haven't really proofed that behaviour, you haven't really tested that behaviour adequately in situations that are going to demand a greater level of compliance and attention from the dog. So if you're the sort of person who recalls your dog and you find yourself saying no a lot and correcting the dog during your recalls, then you really need to look at how that recall has been taught and the stages that you've gone through in teaching that. The same thing goes with your heel position and your heel work as well. Because what quite often happens is that people, even if you've put quite a lot of work in positively with the reward aspect of responding to the recall or a nice heel position, what happens is that if I rely too heavily on the word no rather than the actual the target behavior that I'm after becomes the thing that the dog responds to or associates with the negative aspect or the pressure occurring. So what I mean, if I take the recall as an example, so I recall my dog is out there running around and they've got a pretty good recall. They always come when I've got a bag of sausage, or most of the time 95% of the time seems to be a sort of a relatively generic thing. Yeah, my dog responds 95% of the time. It's just the 5% that matters that I struggle with. But yeah, let's say that my dog responds most of the time with the rewards that I have. But when there's distractions on or whatever, then I find myself saying no, and I'm having to correct the dog, or I'm having to go in and get the dog or whatever, because they failed to respond to the recall cue. If I become heavily reliant upon the no before the correction, if I'm working with a remote collar, or if I'm working with a long line and I want to tap the dog on a long line or whatever, spray collars, anything like that, the dog will await the no. It will be the no that is associated with the correction, rather than the failing to respond. Okay, that's quite an important part. I'm not going to really go into depth on it because I will go on. But if I say come, I give you half a second to a second to respond to it. Say half a second. There has to be a pause. This is important. There has to be a pause between what I say, what I ask of you, and the consequence that follows. And I quite often use this analogy with people when I'm talking with them in respect of lead work. Okay, so quite often you'll see people saying heel, heel, heel. This is me tugging on the lead, right? Heel. Or they'll say heel, heel. And the equivalent thing is somebody saying duck, 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 or duck, duck. I've got no opportunity to learn that, right? I've got no chance, because the timing's all wrong. The placement of the command and the consequence are all to pot. So I need to have, if I'm going to have duck, 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 then I can learn. That isn't ducking, is it? Sorry. But I'm moving out of the way, right? So I've got the opportunity to learn from my previous mistakes. So if I say come, and I reward my dog, come, and I reward my dog, come, and I'm not coming, so I correct, and the dog, whoa, comes back to, hey, good boy, but I'm not going to heavily reward that because I needed to correct you. And then the next time I want to say come, I've now got a dual meaning developing for that word come. I've got two reasons to respond. One is because it's positive in the fact that I get something for it, and the other one is it's positive in the fact that I avoid something negative by responding to it. It goes from being a request to a non-optional command, but it's just the word come. I don't need to say no. I don't have to add that word no. Do you know what I mean? The no complicates things because it's the no that carries the negative association, or I run the risk of the no carrying the negative association. And you will know that you're doing this if you're the sort of person that walks your dog and when you're heeling, they pull forward and you say no, and then you may say heel, no, heel. And quite often the no has been in conjunction with, or perhaps after the event of the pop on the lead or whatever, but something there is wrong. If you're using the word no often, then something there is wrong. You shouldn't be using it. You should be using it sparingly. Doesn't mean to say that you don't correct the dog. You do correct the dog, but you correct the dog in conjunction with the command that you're giving. when you're doing different things, like if you're free shaping behaviors, or you're asking for experimentation from the dog, or if you're asking for the dog to work off its own initiative, then using no in that situation as a guideline that they need to readjust their behavior and try something new, that's a different thing. Or in the acquisition phases of training, where I'm basically shaping the behavior that I want and I'm teaching the behavior that I want, and I'm using no perhaps with slight negative pressure as a guidance to get the yes, that's what I wanted, yes, that's what I wanted. That's a different thing to the out and out correction, if you like, of a dog failing to respond. So that's it. I'm going to shut up. But just to say that if you do find yourself focusing on the word no, have a look at the way that you're teaching the dog. Make sure that there's adequate positive reinforcement going in there. Make sure that the rewards that you're using are rewarding to the dog, and make sure that any corrections that you're involving are timely and directly associated with the command that you're issuing. All right? Lovely.